Welcome to Shut Up and Say Something. I am your host and creator of the show, Deedre Daniel. This podcast is all about how to live a fascinating life, and we're learning how to do that one interesting conversation at a time. We try to stay away from discussing politics, religion, and the ad nauseum topic du jour, but anything else is fair game. And today I am speaking with Owl Goingback. He is an award-winning author who has been writing professionally for over 30 years. And he has written numerous horror novels, screenplays, children's books, magazine articles, comics, and short stories. And he has ghostwritten some books for Hollywood celebrities too, which I don't know if he'll tell us today, but he is nope, not allowed. So just so you know, he has written for some famous people. And today we're going to talk about the life of a horror author, interesting things, and in honor of Halloween coming up at the end of this month, some scary stories too. And this is my first conversation with Owl. I met him because I decided to try something new by attending a Bigfoot conference. And I met David Sidoti there, who had been tracking Bigfoot for over 26 years. And I interviewed him in episode 1. Then he introduced me to Mark Muncy, an author of several spooky history books, which are for sale at Cracker Barrel and drugstores across America. And I interviewed him in episode 12. And then he said, you need to meet Owl Goingback. So here we are, all because I checked out a Bigfoot conference a year and a half ago. Now I get to talk to Owl and you get to meet him as well. So welcome, Owl.
Well, thank you for having me. This is great.
Good. Well, I am highly competitive. It's something that I'm a little embarrassed about, but I can't shake it. It's the way I've been my whole life. And I have this thing for trophies and awards. And I looked up the Bram Stoker Awards that you've won. And for those listening, he has won 3 of these for books that he's written in the past. And for those of you who don't know, Bram Stoker wrote the original Dracula. And so this award is in honor of him. And the actual trophy is a 3-dimensional haunted house. And you open up the front door and the author's name is engraved on a plate inside on a little brass plaque. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is just absolutely awesome. And little confession, I have a shelf on my bookshelf that is completely empty that I will not put. Well, I won't put anything in it because these are for the trophies I'm going to win that I haven't won yet. So I'm just curious, where do you have your 3 haunted houses lined up?
Mine are sitting on top of a bookcase, which is filled with books and short stories I've written. And they are surrounded by famous monster bobbleheads. So
yeah?
This little spooky display that their centerpiece on. And they are adorable. These little haunted houses are great. They were an idea of Harlan Ellison, a famous writer who's probably won more awards than anybody ever in their lifetime. And they were created by a Disney artist, and they are absolutely adorable. So I have these 3 wonderful little haunted houses sitting on top of my bookcase.
Oh, they're really cute. I mean, I would love to win one of those. I'm not a horror author, but I might have to take a stab at it because now I want one of those trophies.
Well, they have categories for nonfiction, so maybe the podcast will work for that category.
It's on. I'm going after him now. My friend Valerie Gordon has 10 Emmys. And so anytime I introduce her to someone, I say, she has 10 Emmys. And she always says, you're way more impressed about these than I am. So I read that you won Best First Novel for Crota. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Crota. And did that spur you to write more because you got that award, or?
It did. It was a surprise. When Crota came out, I was afraid to look at newspapers because I thought the reviews were going to be so bad on it. And when I finally did see a review on it, the people loved it. It was the first review I saw was in Orlando Weekly, and they never give a good review for horror books. And so I go, okay, well, I can come out of hiding maybe because a couple people like it. And then it was nominated for Best First Novel, but it was also nominated for Best Novel of the Year. And it was up against Stephen King's The Green Mile.
Oh, my goodness.
First novel ever to be a finalist in both categories. And
what
made it funny is because I was up against King, because 10 years prior to that, when I had gotten out of the Air Force, I owned a restaurant in Georgia. And one night after work, my wife and I happened to be watching a Stephen King interview on television. And during the interview, she turned to me. She goes, why can't you be smart like him instead of so stupid?
What?
And She was kidding, but she threw down the whole gauntlet, and my male ego responded. Now she had no idea I used to write for fun in high school and when I was younger. So
Uh-huh.
I started writing the very next day, and you write what you know. And back then, I knew martial arts really good, so I wrote an article for a martial arts magazine, and they purchased it. I said, "Well, this is beginner's luck." I said, "Let me write one more. If they buy it, I'll keep writing." Well, I wrote one more, and they bought that article, and so I wrote a few more martial arts articles, but it didn't. They don't pay, so I switched to fiction. And here, 10 years later, almost to the day of being called stupid after watching a Stephen King interview, I was up against the man for best novel of the year. So
That's amazing.
it was
I mean, that
amazing.
really is.
She still calls me stupid though, which is funny. But I mean, but that was the
Aw.
inspiration to get me going, get me serious. I just wanted to try to prove myself.
Wow. So you owned a restaurant. What kind of
Mhm.
restaurant was it?
It was a restaurant lounge. It was my wife's from the Philippines, so we had a lot of Asian food. It was
Uh-huh.
right across the highway from the main gate of the base that I had gotten out of the military there. I did that for 6 years. I started writing, and so we were in Georgia at the time, and my son started speaking with a Southern accent. So I figured it was time to move. So we moved to Florida.
Now you've been writing full time since you left the restaurant life behind?
I've been writing full time since the mid '80s. I think I started
Wow.
about '84.
That's amazing. And you were a sergeant in the Air Force,
I was a
correct?
sergeant in the Air Force. I enlisted at the age of 17, got out at 21, and had a business for 6 years and became a writer.
Wow. Usually when people go in the military, they just stay. It's a safe job.
If somebody's going to tell me what to do, I want them to be smarter than me. And the military is one of those places where you're judged by the number of stripes on your sleeves. They
Mm,
don't judge you as a person. You're just a statistic. And so
mm,
I noticed in life that nobody famous was ever in the military. They became famous after they got out of the military. So I knew there wasn't much in a farmer career, and I became sergeant, and they told me I should write up people for their shoe shines and their uniform. And I'm not a kind of person to write up anybody. I just do my job and go home. So it was time to get out.
I see. Yeah. So then you opened up a restaurant right by the base. Did you
Hmm.
offer any kind of military discounts or did you charge certain
No,
people
we offered
more?
discounts. In fact, we were kind of an oasis for all these guys in the military who were away from home. They could
Uh-huh.
come over to our place and we could talk science fiction and things like that, which wasn't a huge topic in rural Georgia, in the middle of Georgia. So it was
Sure.
kind of, we had all the flight crews, and it was funny because I had all the officers coming over and calling me sir, which was hilarious.
It's quite a switch when you don't have those stripes on.
Yeah, that's it.
My father was in the Navy, both of my grandfathers were in the Navy, and when we lived in England, my father wasn't allowed to wear a uniform in certain parts of the country, and it was just odd the way everyone interacted with each other when they had a uniform on
Hmm.
versus when they were in civilian clothes. And there's something about the uniform and it's stating your status in such a way that you just don't have with regular street clothes,
Yeah,
for
because they
sure.
always looked at what your rank first. They
Yeah.
didn't care about anything else but your rank, and they put you in a little compartment based on your rank, and I hated that.
And even parking spots. If you're an '05, you get the special parking spot closer to the front and all that. Yeah. So I was reading the summary for Crota. I'm going to read that for the audience. Sheriff Skip Harding is called to investigate a homicide unlike any he has seen before. The bodies are torn to pieces in the woods. Some think it's a bear, but others whisper it's the Crota, the great beast of legend that one day will reawaken. And that day has arrived. Where did you come up with this?
Well, there's a combination of different elements. I wanted to do a creature the size of a grizzly that
Okay.
hunted for the pure pleasure of hunting, because man is the only creature on the planet that hunts for sport. I said,
Hmm.
what if you had something that size with the same attitude that it loved the hunt, the thrill of the hunt, and the thrill of the kill? It wasn't killing you because you're hungry, because it was killing you because it thought it was fun. I said that would be a pretty terrifying creature. And Crota was actually inspired by a real event. I grew up in rural Midwest. I was conceived in Oklahoma, born in St. Louis, and I grew up about 70 miles west of the city. It's such a small area that the closest town had 1,200 people, one four-way stop sign. But
Hmm.
that one year in like the summer of '73, my cousins lived on a property on the edge of a forest. And during that summer, we weren't allowed to play outside as kids because there was something in the woods that screamed every night. Now, this was in an area that was not supposed to have any bears or cougars or anything like that. But every night we heard this thing scream, and we didn't know what it was. And
What kind of a scream?
I never heard it, but it was a terrifying, chilling scream, and nobody believed anybody would have heard it. And I remember my cousin took me one day into the woods, and he showed me an oak tree, and there were these huge claw marks in this tree, and they're about 2-3 inches deep, and they went higher than I could reach with my hands. And I was 6 foot at the time, so it was a pretty big creature that made these claw marks. So that sat in the back of my brain for a long time and inspired Crota. So here you had a monster in an area where nobody's going to believe there's a creature. Nobody's going to believe there's a bear. And so when I did Crota, I actually used real settings from my childhood where this took place and incorporated them in the book.
Oh, and right out the gate, your first novel, and it wins all of those awards or in nominations. I mean, that's fantastic.
Well, it's kind of funny because when I wrote Crota, I made sure to surround it by legends and folklore, mythology. So everybody who did a review about the book said it was a real Indian legend. It's not. I made it up. In fact, there was a $1 billion game company ripped it off and got a game extension called the Crota's Lair. And I'm sure they did that because they thought it was, a legend and public domain. But it was funny because I actually had a couple come up to me in a powwow in North Florida, and they said they had seen the Crota. And it was kind of like, oh, well, wait a minute, you saw the Crota? They said, yeah, we saw it in the Ocala National Forest walking around. And they go, it is a real legend, isn't it? And I kind of it broke my heart to tell them that I made it up. But then I quickly covered and said, well, I made it up, but maybe you saw a skunk ape or something. But they really, because of the way the book was written, they thought it was a real thing, and they swore that they saw it.
Well, let's back up a little bit. So they ripped off your story, and you can prove it wasn't in public domain. Did you sue and get some money off of that?
Yeah, but I can't get a lawyer to go against them because they have $1 billion in the bank, and I don't.
Oh.
And a company like that will just nickel and dime you until you give up.
Sure.
But they have an extension called the Crota's Lair, which is about a subterranean creature in the tunnels in an underground city on the moon. My Crota is about a subterranean creatures in tunnels in an underground city on Earth. So you can see the connection, What really hurts is when you go to see vinyl pops of the Crota. That was kind of painful.
I would imagine. I mean, that's your creation.
And it had already been out there in several different countries in several different languages and won the awards. So it wasn't like they couldn't have taken a Google search and typed the word in and found it.
That's really wrong. I hate that. I absolutely hate it when people knock off someone else's idea and don't pay tribute to them or give them any kind of credit or any kind of money like that.
Then you got people knocking that off and writing books based on the game extension. So you go on Amazon, sometimes you see other books called Crota. But it's based on their game extension, which they basically stole the title from me.
Oh, that's awful. I am so sorry.
No, it happens. And they said, well, like my agent at the time, who I fired, said, you can't copyright a title. I said, but it's not just a title. It's
a character.
Yeah, it's the whole thing. It's a concept. I mean, things like that happen, or Hollywood's really bad about ripping stuff off and, changing just a word or two. And it's like, no, this is our creation.
Yeah, well, you always see these movies that all come out at the same time with the same plot line. It's like someone shopped it around and someone else said, we're not going to buy it from you. We'll just steal it. We'll just make our own and release it at the same time.
I had a senior editor at a large New York publishing house come up to me at a convention. And she said, look, we got this book in from somebody. It's an unknown author, but it's basically a Native American philosophy book. Every day you look at it and be happy because you read these little philosophies. She goes, but he's an unknown. Will you take a look at the book and write your own version?
What?
And I was horrified that she wanted me to rip some poor author off. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, have I reached the next level where I'm the insider now on these secrets? And this is what happens all the time?
It's really awful.
I turned them down.
So what do you think the appeal of horror is over other genres?
It's a thrill ride. People like to be scared. That's why they spend their money to come down here to Disney and ride roller coasters or at Universal Studios. We like to thrill. I mean, a horror novel is more than just a read. It's more than just a good story. It gives you that little tingle in the back of your spine, or the hairs on your neck will stand up when it's done right. And a really good horror novel will mess with your head. I mean, you'll be thinking about it a day or two later, or you'll have bad dreams about it. So, it's a cheap thrill. You're not in any danger, but you can feel dangerous. Like I said, it's like a roller coaster without all the vomiting.
I feel like a lot of people in today's world have suppressed their feelings. And I spoke with a romance novelist last week, and her name is Tessa Lane. And I was asking her if reading romance novels could possibly awaken more than just romance in people, but the big spectrum of all the emotions. And for people that are walking around a little numb, would reading horror help with that, or would it help them conquer their fears? What else do you think people get out of reading horror novels?
Well, like horror is always popular during bad times. In the last couple of years, the whole world's gone through some bad times.
Yeah.
So it's nice that you can forget about COVID and the pandemic and the economy and then the grocery stores being bare and read a nice story about a family being chased by some monster. And their situation's far worse than yours. And it helps you keep your mind off of the problems you're going through. Horror
Mm,
always has a resurgence during tough times. I mean, we like to, it's pure escape fiction. It allows
right.
us to forget the problems. If you read a book with a lot of gang violence or something in it, that just reminds you what's on the news. Whereas you
Mm.
read a vampire story, vampires don't exist, werewolves don't exist. So it's pure escape fiction. You can enjoy it without anything from today seeping into your brain while you're reading it.
I've often heard that reading fiction builds empathy because you're in the mind of the character, you're
Mhm.
feeling what the character feels. And in most horror novels, wouldn't there's a conclusion at the end? Usually someone gets away, they conquered something, perhaps.
Very much so. I mean, most horror novels I know the ones I write are basically classic good versus evil stories,
Hmm.
with the good winning in the end. You've got a family that goes through a horrific time, but they always succeed. They always win. I mean, you might lose a couple characters along the way because that happens because life isn't perfect, but it
Right.
does. You're living that thrill, and you're seeing how they survive, and it
Yeah.
almost gives you a hope that you can survive situations too, that you can be
Yeah.
brave like they are.
Hmm. Do you have any favorite horror novels or writers?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, uh, King's great. Kuntz is great. Bradbury did some amazing stuff. I love the short stories of Ambrose Bierce, who did horror, but he also wrote Civil War stories, which were
Mm.
more terrifying than his horror stories because
Really?
he was in the Civil War.
Oh,
He was at the Battle of Shiloh, so he saw the atrocities that happened during that war. In fact, Ambrose Bierce went out and he was worked for a San Francisco paper. Then he went down to Mexico during the Mexican Revolution and vanished. Nobody knows what happened to him.
mm.
But his stories were amazing. And Lovecraft, I enjoyed his stories because the creatures he created. But Lovecraft was like I like to do what I did with Crowdie. I was kind of inspired by him. Is he never really described them in detail. He leaves, he talks around what the monster looks like and leaves it up to the reader's imagination to form their own picture.
Oh, and sometimes that's more terrifying.
It is.
Yeah.
I
Is
did
this like
Crota.
it's
I,
kinda
I
like
did,
sex scenes where you don't see anything, they just
yeah,
sorta go behind the doors, like, "Ooh, what's happening
exactly.
there?" Yeah.
People's imagination is stronger than what I can put on paper. When I did Crota, I did very little descriptive because I wanted everybody to have their own image of the monster. It makes
Mm,
it scarier. It's like Jaws is one of my favorite movies of all time, and it's because it's terrifying because you don't see the shark. I mean, because they had so much trouble with mechanical shark, the first half of the picture you never see it, and that's the
mhm.
scariest part. You don't need to see it. All you need is the spooky music.
Jaws is very scary.
Yes.
I'm so afraid of sharks, and I have no idea if it's because I saw Jaws or maybe in a past life I was attacked by a shark, but I do not like swimming in the ocean at all, and I do blame a lot of it on that movie.
Well, that's what's so great about Florida. We have things that can eat you down here. If the sharks don't get you, the gators will.
Snakes and everything else. So, have you met any of these authors that you admire?
I've met quite a few. I've met like Robert McCammon. Going to conventions, I meet a lot of them. Neil Gaiman's out there. I met him. Joe Lansdale. The only ones I haven't met are like Stephen King because he doesn't do conventions, and I haven't met in person Dean Koontz, but I swapped a lot of correspondence with him.
Well, I feel like you need to meet Stephen King since he's the reason. Like, you got to bring your wife along with you and
Yeah, he
say,
don't care. Yeah,
"Aw,
he's got a billion fans. He don't care, But he was the inspiration. He's the one that inspired me just because of the wife.
yeah." Any letdowns? Have you maybe not an author, but perhaps someone you were a fan of? Did you ever have a letdown when you met a famous person?
Yeah, I won't name them, but yeah, there's been a couple. Not in the horror field. All the horror people I met were nice, but there's been a couple in the science fiction field who turned out to be real disappointments. They were very arrogant. That's a
Ah,
shame because they've gotten to the top and they forgot the people who put them there.
right. When I met John Elway, I'm like, this guy is a jerk. I did not like that guy at all.
Yeah, it happens. You feel bad about them. And you're like, oh, this little crudge munching. It's like I had one guy I had asked to sign a book. We were both guests at the same convention. He started calling me insane because I asked him to sign a book. So I just tossed it in
What?
the trash. It was no big deal.
Wow. Yeah, I don't understand what's the matter with people. Do you remember the show Chips?
The motorcycle chips, or
Yeah, yeah. Do you
yeah,
remember
yeah.
that? Yeah, yeah. So I was a little girl when I saw that show, and I had the biggest crush on Eric Estrada. Huge. And I went to the International Chiefs of Police Conference in Denver in 2009. And there was Eric Estrada, because of Chips, right? So he's doing all these autographs and, photos with all of these chiefs of police that were attending this conference. And I stood in line. I'm like, I am going to meet Punch. I mean, I had the biggest crush on him when I was a little girl. So it's just me in line with all these dudes. And by the time I get up to Eric Estrada, he says, I've been waiting for this. I've been watching you. Look at you. And he takes my name badge, which was on a lanyard, and throws it over my shoulder. He goes, I want nothing between us. And then he hugs me and puts his head right on my boobs, like just right there. And I have a
Nice.
picture. Yeah, I'm serious. I wished I could travel back in time and tell myself, not only will you grow breasts, but he's going to place his head right in the middle of them in public. Like two things I would never possibly imagine. And I wasn't mad about it. I was just completely, enamored and stunned and then laughing at the same time. And like everyone else is snapping pictures, like all the police chiefs taking pictures of this. Like, look at this guy. I'm like, well, it's Eric Estrada. I just got pawed by Punch. But
Have another drink and sit down. Let go.
yeah. I got to say that it was a good fan experience. It was definitely an unexpected fan experience, and yeah, I would do it again. I wasn't offended, but certainly not what I expected, for
I
sure.
had the opposite happen in Atlanta. I was doing a mass signing with some other people, and my good friend, the late Ron Wolotsky, was sitting next to me. And I'm signing an anthology I had a short story in. And this lady comes up to Ron, pulls her top down to have her boobs signed.
Uh-huh.
And I'm trying to concentrate on what I'm doing with this going on next door to me. Trying to spell my name right. And, he's signing breasts, It gets done. I look at us. That's the hardest autograph I've ever done. Talk about distracting.
Do you have any weird fans like that? Has that ever happened to you?
No, not yet.
Not yet. I love it.
But,
Not yet.
yeah, no. My wife would probably beat me to death if that happened to me, especially if I signed them. I'd be a dead man. But no, most writers don't get those kind of things. I think artists live the crazy bohemian lifestyle.
Sure. Well, what in that movie Misery, right? But isn't that written by Stephen King?
Stephen King.
Yeah, they're going back to Stephen King again. But yeah, she was totally enamored with that guy.
Well, it's funny because that Stephen King, I can't remember if it was before or after. I had an incident in a Winn-Dixie store one time. I'm walking in and I had a Horror Writers Association T-shirt on. And this gentleman comes up and starts talking to me. And he was kind of like looked kind of homeless. He was heavy set, kind of creepy looking. And his daughter come up. And she was kind of a pudgy, dirty little girl. And he goes, look, hon, this guy's a horror writer. And this child looks me right in the eyes, goes, Daddy, can we take him home and keep him in the basement?
What?
And it just chills went down the back because I was like, these people have kept people in the basement before. And I literally went out to my car and sat there and waited for them to come out of the store and drive away before I left the parking lot.
Because you didn't want them to follow you.
Exactly, because it looks like they probably had people kept in the basement. Because if they were looked like a version of the Addams Family, they were pretty strange.
But at the same time, I think if I had kids, I would train them to say weird stuff like that to people, just just for the laugh, like, okay, we're going to go talk to these people and ask if we can keep them,
Scared this writer to death.
Oh, it's bizarre. It's hard to tell. Some people have warped senses of humor.
Yeah, some people are just kind of strange. I mean, my granddaughter used to like to ride in the back of my hearse, and when we get to red light, she'd pop up and wave at the people behind us. So yeah. I guess that kind of freaked out a few people too.
We need to explain to everyone why you were driving a hearse.
Well, I actually owned a hearse for a while. I had a chance to buy it from a funeral home I was familiar with. This was back when I was a caretaker for a cemetery. And I put a nice little Grim Reaper mural with an army of skeleton on front and back, and called it
Hmm.
Bone Picker. And drove around and do movie shoots. My friends would borrow the hearse, or I'd do book signings with the hearse, or go to horror conventions. And yeah, I had this Cadillac hearse parked in front of my house for several years. A friend of mine eventually got it because he wanted it, and I offered to him for a good price.
Well,
But yeah,
I'm sure it has a lot of space for your books that you need to haul around.
space. And
Yeah.
so now I have the casket in the living room that went with the hearse. So no way to get it out of the house. So I got this wonderful decorative casket. Of course, it has a motion activated zombie in it, which is great when company comes over.
So you don't take naps in it?
No,
No. Okay. All right. Good to know.
well, it's a used casket. It's a rental casket from Batesville. It's a
Hmm.
beautiful oak casket that was given to me by a funeral director, and they use it. It had bodies in it, but it has a new liner, and they're used for when people are going to be cremated, but they want to do a viewing. So they put
Oh.
the body in there. They do the service, and when they're done, there's a panel opens up at the foot, and they slide the body and liner out, and they send that to the crematory, and they put in a new liner for the next service. They're allowed to use them about 6 times by state law before they have to get rid of them.
Huh. Why 6?
I don't know. It's around that time because they can't use so many. I guess they worry about fluids, even though mine doesn't have any fluids in it.
Ew.
It was used in the video "Beautiful Corpse" by the Bloody Jug Band.
Huh.
Sue Leanne Vamp was in the video. She was in the casket, and Jay LaRose, who starred in Saw 3 and Insidious 1 and 2, he was in the casket too, or
Hmm.
in the video.
Years ago, there was a funeral parlor for sale in my hometown, and I thought, oh, that would be such a cool bar. It could be called the embalming room,
Oh
where
yeah,
where boredom goes to die, and then people have to check their cell phones when they walk in, and then all the different rooms, or like maybe different game rooms or what have you. And I had the whole thing all imagined, and then I thought it'd be great to actually use the hearses to drop people off that way, kind of like a taxi service, and then have them branded so then people would see them driving around town, picking people up in hearses and bringing them to the embalming room.
see that's awesome, and you could have wrote the hearse's office as advertising expense.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So I'm glad you like it. I've pitched this to a couple other people. They're like, that sounds creepy. I'm like, I think it would be a lot of fun.
I would have been there, and all my horror writing friends would have been there.
Yeah. So what makes something universally scary?
Fear of injury, fear of sickness, and fear of death, usually.
Mm,
The fear of the unknown is also universally scary. That dates back to the caveman days. Everybody's afraid of what existed in the darkness beyond the campfires.
yeah.
We're all scared of what we don't know and what we don't understand. I mean, that's why we're scared of other cultures. We don't know them. I mean, that's what why people get away with making us hate other cultures and saying things about them. We don't know the people. That's
Hmm.
why things like the internet can be dangerous to those philosophies because you get to know people. I mean, once you know them, you're not scared of them, and you certainly don't hate them anymore. But it's
Right.
really the unknown that we're afraid of.
Yeah. And afraid of change.
Change too as an unknown because you don't know what's going to happen. We want our nice normal lives with no outside influence.
Uh-huh. Franchises. Right.
People ask me what scares me the most. I say the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
reality scares me more than anything I've ever read in a horror novel.
Mm. For those people listening that have aspirations to write, do you recommend that they try to get with a traditional publishing house or do self-publishing?
I mean, I know people who've been very successful self-publishing and made a lot of money. I am too lazy to do that much work. I'd rather have somebody where I can hand the book off to a publisher and have them do the work for me. And
And
I
what do
just
you mean by work? What does the publisher do? So you
well,
did all the work to write the book, then it's a matter of
you got to do all the
advertising and
work
marketing
to
the
write
book?
it. You got to format it. You got to come up with the cover, find somebody
Uh-huh.
to do the cover work. Once you've got it there, you got to upload it to like places like Amazon. Make sure it's available. You got to advertise. There's a lot of work in self-publishing. I mean,
Hmm.
if you want to be successful, I mean, yeah, if you just throw your book up there and not willing to do all the work, you're not going to have the sales.
Yeah, because
Uh,
people need to know about it.
yeah, self-publishing, you're not going to see the book in bookstores. And for the longest time, I mean, I did one self-publishing, but I didn't like it. It was a collection, and I pulled it back down, and a small press publisher republished it. I didn't like it, but the reason I did it is because for years I said, well, I told my wife, I said, well, it won't be in bookstores. And finally, they closed Borders by me, and they closed a Books a Million. I
Mm.
realized there aren't any bookstores left. There's very few. So it doesn't matter to be holding out for a bookstore release because there's less and less bookstores in America.
I heard Amazon's going to start opening up bookstores again.
Well, they need it. I mean, people need places they can go and see the physical books.
It just kills me that they killed the bookstore and then they're going to be the
Open it
ones
up,
that
yeah.
bring it back.
Yeah, it's a shame because I miss Borders. I miss B. Dalton's starting to come back, but a lot of the great bookstores I had several in the neighborhood. They're not here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I have no place to go on a Friday night.
Have you ever been out to Portland, Oregon?
No.
Oh, because they have that huge bookstore. I think it's called Powell's. I mean, it's gigantic. You just get lost in the stacks. It's so amazing.
Yeah, bookstores are great. I mean, you don't get that from Amazon. That's why I don't have a Kindle. It's like I want the sensation of holding books. I want the smell. I mean, sometimes my office is funny because late at night I'll be sitting here working and I'll get that smell of old books. Just kind of drift past me. And I'm like inhaling and bringing back childhood memories of the old libraries I used to go to.
I love the smell of library books.
It's the best.
Mm-hmm. When I was a little kid, I would just grab a book and just shove my nose right in the middle of the
like
spine.
Catnip for us.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a great smell. Many stories and movies will follow a structure. Do you follow a specific framework? I mean, you did mention that in the end, people still win. I mean, they get a win at the end, but is there any other framework that you typically follow?
No, I let the story tell itself. I just consider myself lucky enough to receive it. I mean, when I'm doing it with a major publisher, I'll do an outline, usually a detailed chapter by chapter outline. But I'll tell them, I'll go, okay, this is just an outline. When I do the actual laying out of the book, things can change. And I did that with one of my novels. I don't want to mention it because I don't want to give a spoiler. But I had where I designed the entire book to have a happy romantic ending between the two characters. Mm-hmm. But I was driving home. I saw an image of the one character's face stuck to the side of a beer carton. I said, that's just too funny. So I went in and changed the book. Instead of, a happy romantic ending, I got to the ending and I killed one of the characters and slaughtered.
Well, that doesn't sound like a win.
It was for me. People weren't expecting it. I was getting hate mail because of it.
I bet.
You go, I hate that you killed this character, but I see why you did it. So I had to, instead of having a happy romantic ending, I got to do a tearjerker, which is much more fun.
Do you grow attached to any of your characters?
I do, and I'm superstitious too. When I'm writing, if I got a character named John Doe, I will not type John Doe dies or John Doe died from a gunshot. I won't do that because in my mind he's died, and it ruins the story for me. I'm very superstitious about that. But yeah, you become attached to them, and characters will change on you. They'll do stuff you don't expect. They'll do their own thing. Mm-hmm. And minor characters that you think are not going to be important to the story come out to be the biggest part of the book. I did a book. My recent book is Coyote Rage, and it's got shapeshifters and things like that. And I got a character in there as a shapeshifter named Raven, but he's got a mouse that he could understand his mouth, talk to it. And the character of Mouse and the combination of Mouse and Raven were hilarious. Where when the Raven's in bird form, Mouse is riding on his back, licking his wound. But Mouse is very comical. So they became such important characters to me that I got to continue on in another story.
Oh, it's great that you were able to do that, though.
Yeah, they took over. They took a life of their own, and I didn't expect it. And I'm like, oh, these guys are so much fun playing with.
How many hours a day do you write?
As few as possible. No, I'll put in 4 or 5 on a good day. I used to do 12-hour sessions, but I'm getting older, and I can't stand being in the chair as much.
Yeah, I mean, that's bad for your back and your butt and everything else.
You get up, you can't move. So deadlines are always a pain. It's like, oh yeah, we want this next week. I'm like, what?
Yeah. So you don't have a schedule where you wake up, you go for a walk, and then you write from 10 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon.
I'm a terrible morning person. I hate mornings. My body doesn't even come awake in the morning. Usually after dinner or before dinner, I'll start. And I love working till like 12, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. My favorite times is when you're jazzed on coffee and you're still up and you drink so much caffeine that the walls are moving around you and you're hearing sounds in your ears. That's just the best time for writing because it feels like the whole office is filled with ghosts because you get seeing so many things out of the corner of your eyes. So that's the fun time for me. It's like the witching hour.
When you're tripping on coffee, what's going on with your wife? What is she doing?
Sleeping.
So she leaves you alone? She doesn't walk in and interrupt you or anything like that?
She knows not to. I'll put a little sign on my door. Nobody bothers me.
Well, that's good.
She's doing her own thing. If I'm not working, she'll be looking at me like, why aren't you in there working?
Bring home the bacon.
She used to catch me. I had a TV. Once upon a time, I had an old TV in here, and it would go out, and I had to slap the side of the TV for it to come back on. And she
Uh-huh.
would hear that in the other room and know I wasn't working to come here and fuss at me.
Well, where do you get your inspiration for your next story?
I belong to the Story of the Month Club. It's out of Topeka, Kansas. Once a month, I get this brown envelope, and they send me 10 ideas. And it costs $23.95 a year.
Oh, you're joking.
Yeah, I'm joking.
Mm-hmm.
Just looking around, reading other stuff. I rarely read fiction, but I'm always reading weird legends and folklore and
Uh-huh.
haunted stories and things like that because just ideas. I was reading one book one time, and they had an article about this lady in Spain, a little village in Spain. These stains started forming on her tile floor, and as the stains darkened, they turned into faces, and they looked like faces. They had photos of them, and they were terrifying. They were faces, and the local village got involved. They tore up her terrazzo floor. They put down a new floor. Same thing happened. Faces formed again, one, two pairs of them, triplets of them, and they tore up the floor 3 times. And they could not figure out what was causing these stains. And they looked like faces. They were horrifying. And they
Uh-huh.
finally tore up the tile floor and tore up the concrete. And it turns out her little cottage had been built over a cemetery where people who died during the Inquisition were buried. So I was
Ooh.
thinking, wow, if what would you do if you're sitting there having your cornflakes in the morning? You look down, and these faces are looking up at you. And I had to use that for a book, so I used it in my novel Darker Than Night.
Mm-hmm.
I added the folklore legends of the Hopis because the Hopi believe that the world we live on here is the third level. Well, it might be the fourth level. I can't remember now. Maybe it's the fourth level. There's 3 levels below us. And long ago, the ancestors of the Hopi come up from the lower level through an opening in the ground called a sipapuni. That's why in their kivas today, in their ceremonies, they have a little hole in the kiva, represents the original hole that they came up from to the level below. I said, what if they came up, but they left creatures down below that were evil? And so what
Mm.
if these creatures were what forming the faces on the floor because they're trying to come through?
Ah.
So I managed to tie in a couple of different legends that I read, inspired a book. So I'm always looking for like those little tidbits to come up with story ideas.
And that certainly would be an interesting feature at like the carpet store or what have you. Like if you have these spirits, we're holding these back and there's a little stain guard on here.
And they
And
cover them up. Well, the story also used the Kachina dolls, and this house had a Kachina dolls in the story. And when the evil would try to come through the floors and walls, the Kachina dolls would turn to face the evil. Now, my
Mhm.
mother has a large collection of Kachina dolls, and when I go over to her house, I'd always manage to turn a couple of them around when she wasn't looking, just to mess with her, like the evil was coming through the walls, and she hated that.
Oh, I bet. When I write my cards for my card games and my game show, I get my inspiration from weird facts I read or just bizarre news stories, kind of like what you were saying. So, for instance, I read just recently that robots will be firing humans in the future. I mean, it's already started to happen. And so then my follow up question is, well, how do you kiss up to a robot boss?
Ooh, it'd be tough.
I mean, you got to think
Bring
like
them
these
motor oil or something,
See, yeah. So, you're thinking it's an actual physical robot, but
Yeah.
really, when you think about a lot of AI, it's just sort of in the computer. We don't even see like a creature at all, right? So, how do you teach the AI, empathy so that they grow attached to you?
You got to start by giving compliments to Siri every day. Siri, you're looking great today. How you feel?
Right. Right. Yeah. Or would you want your robot boss to be dumb? Like, would you want to give it a virus to make it dumber?
It could be worse. It could, do something else to you. You never know.
Yeah, right? I really don't. I'm like, how do you kiss up to a robot boss?
They have to be physical for you. Here's a tray of nuts and bolts here.
Right? Here's a line of
2001
code
where,
I'm gonna feed you.
like a 2001 where you have Hal and they're trying to talk to Hal. Like, please don't do this, Hal. And they're locking him out of the spaceship.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it'd be hard to do.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so I was spending a little bit more time than I probably needed to think about that. I'm like, how would you kiss up to that boss?
Yeah, we're all doomed.
All right. So why don't you tell me a story?
Oh, now you're going to put me on the spot. What kind of story you want?
Oh, shoot. Well, you had mentioned before something about paranormal research, so we could start there. And then if you wanted to do some Native American
Oh, okay.
folklore or anything like that.
I've done a ton of paranormal research. I mean, My novel Breed is set in the city of St. Augustine, Florida, which is basically the oldest European settlement in America. It dates back
Yeah.
like the 1500s, continuously occupied. And I didn't plan on doing a book up there, but one day I went up there and I took one of the ghost tours, and kind of got interested in the whole legends of ghosts. And I went back up there, and my wife and I went to the Talamado Cemetery, which is the old Catholic cemetery, and it's no longer used for burials. And that night, a business next door to it had left her gate open. So I was able to get to the back outside of the cemetery. Nobody goes. And it was around midnight, and I stuck a 35 millimeter Pentax camera up against the fence, and I fired off a couple of shots. And when I developed the film, in this one picture, there's a green beam of light coming down and hitting this above ground crypt.
Mm.
Standing in this green beam of light is a woman, and you could see her, but you can see through her. And she's wearing a old 1800 style wedding dress. It had the half veil and the white, and you can see her. And you can see the curl of her hair. She had black hair, and she's facing the crypt, but her eyes are looking straight at me, and she doesn't look happy. And her face looked like the old crypt keeper off the TV series. She looked like a corpse. So I was like, whoa, I caught this on film. And I got very interested in the stories. So I started researching it. It turns out hundreds of people have seen this spirit or claim to see it. And they call her the bride because the legend is she was buried a week before her wedding. So they buried her in her bridal gown. And they all said it was the same area of the cemetery where I happened to be that night and caught the picture. So in my research, I started, researching everything about St. Augustine. And I've sat down with the city council, the former chief of police, and every single one of them's got ghost stories. And they're all believers. So it's kind of set the stage for Breed, where I introduced the main character is a ghost tour guide. And there's another place up there is a St. Francis Inn. And room 3A is supposed to be haunted. And the story is, back in the day, it was a boarding house. And a nephew of the guy who owned it fell in love with a slave girl they call Lily. And that back then that was forbidden, and they sent her away. And he was so distraught over it that he hung himself in the attic, which became room 3A. So I thought it was an interesting story, and I went up there when I did a book signing, and friends of mine wanted to see St. Augustine. So they were with me, and I took them to St. Francis Inn, and the room 3A at the time, the lights were on, but their shutters were closed. They had half shutters in the windows, so you couldn't see the bottom half of the window, but you could see, the rest, the top. They snapped a digital picture, and when we looked at this photo, here in this picture is a black woman sitting in the photo, clear as a bell. And she got a turban around her head, and she's sitting there, and she's holding a black child, a baby, wrapped in a blanket. And we're like, whoa, that's Lily. I mean, and I was there when I took the picture. There was nobody in that window. No way anybody could be in that picture. And so I got to thinking about the story associated with it. They said they had sent her away. I'm like, well, why does she haunt the place and not the guy that hanged himself? Well, she's sitting there holding his baby because they may send her away, but they might have killed her back then because that was a big taboo. And this was in an era that would have ruined the whole family reputation. But she's sitting there waiting for dad to come home because she's got his child. And it was clear in the picture. So just little things like that, just researching St. Augustine and the paranormal was fascinating to me.
I'm assuming you still have that picture that you took.
I've got a copy. You have to catch me in person to see it. I won't ever post somebody's photos on the internet because they're kind of special. When you get something like that and you capture something like that, and it's almost like you were allowed to capture it. You don't want to share it on the internet. It kind of cheapens it. But I'm happy. I've showed people, they shocked the hell out of them. And the one of the bride, they were freaked out when they saw it. And it's like, okay, I caught her. She wasn't happy about being photographed. It was tricky because in a different spot. And managed to catch her. But, that's what's fascinating about St. Augustine. That's why, Florida in itself, there's so many weird stories and legends in Florida. So much history here. I always say I'm going to move out of the state, especially right after a hurricane. I don't want to be here anymore. But there's always some weird stuff I discover that makes me want to just stay a little bit longer. Mark Muncy told me a story about Lake Wales, about the little gnomes. I don't know if he spoke about this on your show before.
He did not tell me about the little gnomes.
This blew my mind. At Lake Wales, back, I think in the 50s, there was a case of people that had stuff happening around their house. They had a little orange orchard, and they set out a trap. And they caught this little bitty man, little gnome, and they caught the guy. They're like, well, whoa. So they called the police and turned it over to the police. The police took it. Well, the next night when it got dark, the other little bitty gnome-like creatures come out of the woods were throwing oranges at the house. So the people were so frightened they had to contact the police. They bring it back. So they brought it back and turned it loose. So there should be a police record about this little bitty man they caught at Lake Wales, which is fascinating.
Like a garden gnome?
Yeah, like a little bitty small man, which is fascinating because the Cherokees believe in little people. I
Uh-huh.
mean, there's stories of the Cherokees up in Georgia and North Carolina. There's stories about the little people. It's part of the tribal folklore, and they very much believe it. A lot of tribes believe it. It's part of Indian folklore. Even the Vikings wrote about little people when they came to this country.
Yeah.
And in fact, in Franklin, North Carolina, there's supposed to be some caves that appear to be man-made. They're so small that you can't stand upright in them. And they
Hmm.
found little tools and stuff from like could be used by small hands. So to this is it's believed today. The Lakota people out in South Dakota where they do the Sundance, and I've had friends tell me that they go to the Sundance every year. There's a valley out there that nobody goes to because they call it the home of the little people. And the story was told to me that my friends were camping one night at the Sundance time, and their tent started shaking. And the one guy unzipped the tent and looked at the tent next to him, and he could see something grabbing the fabric and climbing up the side of the tent, but it wasn't visible to the human eye. So he was just like, "Oh yeah, it's a little person messing with them." But they all know these stories out there. So it's fascinating that we have little people stories in Florida.
Hmm. Well, Lake Wales is not that far from me.
Oh, see, they get
Yeah.
Lake Wales also got a lake down there called Lake. It's either Cinch or Clinch. I can't remember, but
Uh-huh.
it's got a story of a water monster. I got a call when I was a caretaker at Greenwood Cemetery to look for a particular grave of a man who died in 1926. The story is he went fishing, but he didn't come home. The next day, they found his body with his face bit off. They couldn't identify the bite marks. They claimed he was a victim of the lake monster who was there that several people have seen.
Hmm.
So water monsters and little people, you can't go wrong with stuff like that.
No, no, you really can't. Any other stories you want to share?
Oh, there's all kinds. I mean, I got shushed in St. Augustine by a ghost, which is
You
pretty
got
cool.
shushed by a ghost?
I got shushed by a ghost.
What?
I
All right.
was
First off, what were you doing, and what were you saying that you got shushed?
well, I was running my mouth like I always do. Well, I was in the Government House Museum, which dates
Uh-huh.
back, to the Spanish times. Sunday morning, 9 o'clock, I was with my wife. We went into the museum and went up on the second floor where they have all exhibits, and they had an exhibit on how they built the houses back in the day. And I'm talking, and all of a sudden, really loud, shh! And I kind of jumped and was like, "Oh, I was being noisy." And I know they had a little section where they had like a little movie viewer thing you could go to. And I was like, I was embarrassed. Then we started looking around, and there was nobody there. So I go,
Hmm.
okay. So we went downstairs, and there was an elderly woman behind the counter who was managing the place. And I called her over. I said, "Ma'am, I have a question. Was I talking too loud?" And she said, "No. Why?" I go, "Next question. You didn't just shush me?" And she's like, "No," and kind of didn't know where my questioning was going. I said, "Okay, and I have a final question. Do you ever have anything weird happen here?" And she got this wonderful little smile. She goes, "All the time, second floor."
Oh, so you did get shushed by a
That's
ghost.
gosh, I was talking too loud on a Sunday morning and somebody didn't like it.
Well, that's something. All right. Any other stories before we move on?
I got followed out of the Pirate House restaurant in Savannah, Georgia by a ghost. We went there because we heard the place was haunted and I wanted to check it out. We are going to have lunch there, but it smelled like old fish and we didn't want to eat. So we're walking out and a couple, our friends were in front of us. My wife and I behind them. We're walking on the sidewalk. And I hear as we leave the restaurant, somebody followed us out the restaurant. And the footsteps are getting closer and closer and closer, and they're on top of us. So my wife and I, at the same time, not even looking around, stepped aside, let this person pass. And there was nobody there.
What?
So we're like, okay. And our friends stopped, like, "What are you guys doing?" I'm like, "You're not going to believe this," but it was
Yeah.
obvious.
Wow. Well, that is something. You have walked the medicine path and have helped others in need. And I was wondering if you could elaborate a little on native medicine, sweat lodge ceremonies, and the purpose behind vision quests.
Okay. Native medicine is kind of a tricky term because people think, medicine, but it's curing the body and the spirit. I mean, it's both important. I
Hmm.
mean, the medicine's a broad term when you say that. It not only covers herbal cures, physical cures, spiritual cures, but it's also ceremony. It's a
Mm.
lot. It's also religious based. Uh, a lot of, the belief is, medicine people don't take credit for the gift they have. It all comes from the creator. If you're allowed to, if he's allowed to use you and use stuff through you, then all the credit goes back to him. Uh, a lot of ceremony, learning medicine is a very difficult path. I mean, nothing's written down in the book. I mean, it's all oral. And if a lot of times the medicine's thrown out in stories, and if you didn't catch the teaching element, then you didn't deserve to have it.
Mm.
Uh, I'm a pipe keeper, and so I do a lot of that. That's our
Well,
prayers are done.
hold on. What's a pipe keeper?
It means I have a medicine pipe. It is a pipe that was awakened by a legitimate medicine man,
Mm.
uh, and I use it for prayers and for ceremonies. It's mine's about so big. You go out and we do prayers with the pipe because when we pray, the smoke goes up, and we believe that goes to the home of the Great Spirit.
Okay.
When we do our prayers, we offer prayers to the pipe to all four directions, the Creator, Grandmother, and our ancestors. And we're asking the spirits to come in and be with us. Usually, it's if I'm doing it for somebody else, they're sitting there with me, smoking a pipe with me. Maybe the medicine they need might be, it might be trouble with spirit. It might be something mental. Maybe they're going through a rough time. It might be something physical. This is all part of the ceremonies. It's part of it. You might do herbal too, but the pipe's part of it. Uh, I've helped quite a few people that were in need of direction, and sat there with a pipe with them. Now the thing is, pipe keepers, when you do a medicine ceremony, I mean, like I say, you know, the help you're doing isn't coming from me. I'm nobody. It's coming through me to them. I'm helping them out as a conduit. But a lot of times, if they're in need of strong medicine, if they really have a bad time, it'll leave me drained. I'll be very weak and dizzy, and have to do other ceremonies to get my physical powers replenished. Pipes also part of other ceremonies like a sweat lodge. A sweat lodge is not only for purification, but it's also for people who need guidance or people need. Uh, so it's kind of hard to say. With medicine, it's physical and spiritual. There is no separation with that. We cure both.
Well, I
Sweat
think
lodge,
with a lot of Western medicine, they just sort of try to cure the symptoms, but
yeah,
don't always look at like the person overall and what's going on mentally and emotionally, because
exactly.
that, your body reacts to those.
And it's true. I mean, you got to cure the person, cure the spirit. I mean, Asian medicine is closer to Native American medicine because they understand that. They
Hmm.
understand that the body is, host for their spirit. You got to make sure the spirit's well, or the body will die.
Hmm.
Sweat lodge ceremonies, very hot. You're doing the prayers inside. You're offering a pipe. There's always a person outside watching the situation who's the helper, who passes the hot coals or the hot stones or bricks inside. But they're watching. I remember I
How
was out.
long are you in one of those tents? How long are you in there for?
Oh, quite a while. I mean, you do several rounds of the prayers and the offerings and stuff. I've never really timed it. It could be half an hour, hour. I mean, you're not going to die in there. We make sure if it gets too hot, you open the flap up. It's not
I
going to be
see.
like the case out west where they had several people die because the guy running it didn't know what he's doing. We're not
Mm.
there to torture people because
Hmm.
elderly people do it, or people who might have medical problems who can't take it.
Yeah, you could
I mean,
dehydrate.
you're not going to you're not going to kill them, or just try to. It's not an endurance test.
Mm.
I went
Okay.
there. I did one time where I was helping. I was assisting a medicine man, and a woman was in there, and she was there mainly because she's having a hard time dealing with the death of her son who died in the army. And what happens is she goes in there, asks what she's asking to the medicine man. He does his ceremony. It's what he sees and what occurs to them in the sweat lodge. Also, what occurs outside. He'll come and talk to me and say, "What did you see? What did you observe?" So I tell him what I saw. He knows what he saw, and then he goes and tells her what the diagnosis is, what she can do, and what he's seen, and especially the spiritual way, it, for her for her situation.
Mm.
It's kind of hard to describe what she's done it, but I've been through several ceremonies like that on the inside, and you do see stuff, and it sounds really crazy to say it to non-native people, but you see spirits, you see things that are there to help you. They
Mm.
they do enter. Yeah, I mean they'll show you things. Uh, you're not hallucinating. I mean, there's no drugs in the pipe that you smoke. We don't do marijuana. Marijuana is a European plant. The pipe has kinnikinnick in it, which is tobacco and maybe cedar, sage, and a couple other things mixed with it. None of it gets you high. I mean, each tribe has their own mixture. But tobacco is our invention, but we didn't invent it to be cigarettes and cause cancer. We do it in ceremonial pipes. And like I said, you're not high, and the stuff you see will stay with you. I mean, you can't do it every day with a sweat because you're gonna fast first. You'll fast for a day before you go into the sweat. And it's all precise steps you got to do for it. The vision quest. I did a vision quest when I was probably in my 30s. I was on an island near Jacksonville. A vision quest is basically you spend several days in the wilderness in prayer. I had my pipe with me, but they sealed the tobacco with wax, so I couldn't smoke it. I could offer it to the Great Spirit, but I couldn't use it. I could offer prayer. So I had a pair of shorts and a blanket, maybe about that much water, maybe a quart of water. But you don't know how long you're going to be out there. It was June or July. It was hot. So the whole time is a miserable experience, but you're in prayer the whole time. And you're sacrificing yourself to the Creator kind of a little bit. Because, basically we believe everything we own belongs to Him. And the only thing that doesn't belong to Him is our body. So we can kind of sacrifice that. But you're in prayer the whole time. And you're asking for a vision. You're asking for guidance. You're asking for medicine to help you in this lifetime. And I was out there maybe 4 days. I mean, I didn't drink the water because, I didn't know how long I'd be out there. I got what I went out there for. I saw what I wanted to see. I was never high, never hallucinating. I wish I was. I mean, but no, I was in pain all the time. And coffee's wearing off. So you got a caffeine headache and medication's wearing off. And I spent most of the time holding the blanket over my head so I wouldn't fry under the sun. And I was so weak when I got done, I could barely walk. I went back in and had to immediately go into a sweat lodge ceremony for a second time. And I was so dehydrated, I didn't sweat. I looked like a POW. I really did. My wife was shocked how bad I looked. I lost like 20 pounds in 2 days. I looked great. I mean, but yeah, it was. And during the time, I went back out there, and medicine man goes out there and he retrieves certain things from where I was staked out in the circle, and adds to a pouch that he made. He already put stuff in it. It was a medicine pouch. And that was given to me to wear for the rest of my life to give me personal medicine. I don't know what's in it. I'm not allowed to look in it. If the leather wears out, I got to change it without looking and put the items in another pouch. But I've worn that.
That would be so hard for me not to look.
Yeah, I know. I'm wearing it now. I've worn it every day since then. But yeah, it's kind of the medicine, it's very rewarding. It's very tough. I had a lady come up to me at a powwow and she needed medicine and she was in bad hurt. And she asked if a medicine man was on the grounds. I said, look, they don't advertise. I said, the way the belief is, if you're in need of medicine, then you'll find it. All you do is ask to, do a right prayer or ask the people above. And I sent her on her way. I said, there was a medicine man there, but it was up to her to find him. I came back an hour later and she had walked the medicine man up to me to introduce him to me. I was just smiling because like, okay, she needed the medicine. It was, it was legit. So it was given to her. It's like when I say we don't write it down, it's kind of like the medicine is if the person gives you a medicine for the sickness you have, and that was given to you. It won't be given to somebody else because they don't need it. That was your personal medicine. It's
not like mass produced Tylenol.
No. And when they die, they take their knowledge with them, unless they have somebody who is sacrificed and done the training who deserves the mantle to be passed on to them. Wow. There's nobody, it disappears. And it's not going to be written down, which is a shame because a lot of the teachings, a lot of the medicine are gone. A lot of the platform disappearing, and it's not going to be written down. So we don't know if, cures for cancer and things like that, disappeared.
Sure.
For personal teaching levels, the same way what my ancestors did with the storytelling. I mean, my son went up and studied under the medicine man. He stayed a couple of weeks with him. And I said, well, what are you learning? And he's like, nothing. I go, what do you mean? I go, well, he hasn't taught me anything. I go, what are you doing at night? He said, oh, we're doing bead work. I said, okay, what's happening with your bead work? Oh, we're sitting around. He's telling stories. I'm like, pay attention. I said, because the teaching's in the story. If they throw it out there and you didn't catch the teaching, then you didn't deserve to have it. So that's how the way it's taught. It's kind of tossed out there.
Can you imagine if we threw out the algebra and you didn't catch it? You don't deserve it.
I know. Yeah, it kind of makes you more attentive to when people are talking and learning and stuff.
Yeah.
if you're one-on-one with somebody like that, somebody of medicine, and they're sharing a story with you, then you're paying attention. You're not thinking about, oh man, I got to go home. I go to the bank tomorrow. I'll run to do laundry. Because we do that when we have conversations. We don't listen. We end up missing a lot.
I agree. Absolutely. And especially interrupting as well. I think that's a fascinating concept that it's said once and that's it. You need
I like
to.
how they used to have conversations back in the old days, especially when they're sitting in the circle. They would have a feather they would pass around, and the person who held the feather was allowed to speak.
Mm,
Everybody else had to listen. So he would say what he had to say and pass it to the next person. It's a great way to be able to talk uninterrupted. You'll get your turn, but you
mhm.
got to listen to what they have to say first.
Yeah. You can't just be focused on what you want to say. And you need to be succinct, right? You can't just hold that feather forever.
No, pass it on. Give me that feather.
That's right. So I've heard of a few people that'll say they are a shaman. Is that the like first tip that maybe you're dealing with the fraud? I mean, how do I know if I'm dealing with a legit person?
Yeah, I would
Go ahead.
back off anybody uses a title or hangs a shingle. I know so many people who learn a little bit, hang out a shingle, say they're a shaman.
Uh-huh.
But no, because they don't. The real people don't have to advertise. People know. I mean, word of mouth will get around here. They don't have to hand you a business card. If they hand you a business card as shaman, I would go the other way.
What about these retreats? They have these sort of fancy retreats and there'll be a shaman with you kind of thing. Is that another red flag?
If they charge, I mean, yeah, it'd be a red flag for me. But a lot of those places charge money,
No, they charge
and
a lot of money.
anybody who is gifted, they don't charge. I had an aunt who was gifted. We use in modern society, we use the term psychic. She
Mhm.
knew things. I could never ever prove her wrong. I never went to a doctor as a kid. We would go and ask her for the cure or what was wrong with us, and she was never wrong. We tried to prove her wrong, and she was poor as a church mouse because she could never charge for her gift. But she would sit on the phone all day long because people called her from all over the world, would ask advice and things like that, what they could do about stuff. But she was not allowed to charge because if you the gift is exactly that. It's a gift. It was given to you to help others. You're not allowed to charge. If you do, you lose the gift. People who are given gifts like that, and they end up charging. And next thing you know, they don't have the gift. So they're still charging, but they're making up stuff.
Are there any questions that you think I should have asked you so far before we move into the other segments?
No, no, this is fun. Like I said, I could babble all the time, but hopefully not get myself in trouble. That's one thing. Being a Native American and writing stories that have Native American characters, like with Crota and some other places. In the books, the stories have ceremonies that I'm often do because with
Hmm.
the characters. But I always make sure not to do a ceremony word for word, so nobody can just take one of my books and we're going to go do this.
Yeah.
And I had elders who would look at them first and make sure, I made them uncomfortable with things, and then I'd say, look, I never put anything in a book that hasn't already been in print somewhere else before.
Mm.
I'd show them like some volume from the 1800s, like, look, it was already printed at the ceremony, so I'm allowed to talk about it. So I always
Mm.
did steps to keep myself from getting in trouble. So
Right. Yeah.
some people will be like, oh, you told tribal secrets. No, I didn't say anything that you didn't already know about.
Mm. Well, speaking of trouble, I was watching this show called The Morning Show, and it has Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon. And one of the TV anchors gets in trouble for mentioning that he has a spirit animal. And there was a public outcry, not a real one. This was all part of the drama, but he had to go on like an apology tour of sorts. And I hear that term thrown around quite a lot. And I wanted to get your take on that. Is that offensive and why people should not say that
Yeah,
or
it
not?
doesn't. Nothing offends me. I'm old. I'm used to it. But there's a lot of people out there nowadays that get offended about everything. They want trigger
That's
warnings on horror novels now. If people like Native Americans get upset about the term spirit animals, you go back in other cultures, and North mythology and stuff have spirit animals. So
oh,
nobody can really claim that as only theirs, because
oh,
a lot of mythologies have spirit animals or have the hero warrior guided by a spirit. Whether it's the crows that belong to Zeus or something
yeah.
else. So Native people can't just claim that. And if they do, they're just being assholes. I'm sorry. But no, it
Oh,
doesn't offend me. I can explain about the belief in spirit animals. It's just, it's not so much the animal as a spirit, but our ancestors and our family members who are spirits who crossed over, they will come back in a form that's familiar to us. something that's going
I
to get
see.
your attention. Like
Mm,
I see a hawk, and I recognize it
mm-hmm.
as somebody, trying to deliver a message to me. Especially the way it acts. If they don't act like normal hawks, and that's could be called a spirit animal, but no, it's just a spirit using that bird to get my attention to deliver a message.
I see. Okay.
The native belief is, the spirit, when we die and cross over, it's not some far off world we can't come back from. Our family, our ancestors are still here. They're very close. I mean, it would be such a cruel punishment that you were to die and be sent to some far off place and not be able to come back and help your family or at least see your family. I mean,
Mm,
that's not a reward; it's a punishment. So, the spirit world and the physical world are very close. So, spirits can come back and they'll look over us and they'll try to help us and try to guide us. And when they do, we have what we call spirit guides. Well, this could be an ancestor, it could be your grandma, it could be somebody. The greatest reward is when you cross over, is you're allowed to come back as a guide and help your family. Now, a lot of times they will use something we're familiar with. Let's say you had a grandma that loved yellow butterflies. Now, when she comes back and she wants to get your attention because you're going, Grandma, what should I do? Should I do this or not? And she may have grabbed the closest yellow butterfly and appear before you. Because right then you're going to see that and go like, wow, that must be Grandma. It's a yellow butterfly. She loved yellow butterflies. Well, it's got your attention. Now, with your question, you always kind of like, which way did
owl.
it?
My grandmother loved yellow butterflies.
There
It's
you
so
go.
creepy that that's what you just mentioned.
See, there you go. And it'll get your attention. I mean, it was
Uh-huh.
funny because my mother died. I did a prayer ceremony in the backyard, and a yellow butterfly flew past. And I said, well, my mother's name was Quiet Star. So I said, well, hello, Star. I know that's you, but I expected a hawk at least. So the very next day, a hawk landed on the fence. It was
Wow.
during a tremendous thunderstorm. My mother was terrified of thunderstorms. And this hawk sat there during the entire downpour of this thunderstorm. And instead of getting rained on, and I'm talking to her, I'm on the back porch talking to this hawk, and this huge bolt of lightning and thunder crashed, and it ducked and gave me a look like, that's enough. Don't you know who I am? And I was laughing. I said, okay, you can go. And so it
Hmm.
took off. And for 3 days afterwards, it came to the house and just sat on a little post right next to the house. Especially at dinner time, it would be sitting there. And so I'm like, all right, you let us know that you crossed over, you're happy, you got your wings, and you came back to let us know. So, I recognize stuff, my spirit guide appears a lot of times as a hawk. It always has. So if I'm doing a ceremony and I'm asking a particular question like, should I go to this convention or should I trust this person? And depends on how I ask. If I see a hawk about that time, I realize, think about what the question was and what the different directions mean. I see the hawk, I know, okay, this bird's trying to tell me something. Carlos Castaneda had the greatest line in a book one time. He was sitting there talking about sitting in the desert, the sun going down. The coyote walks up and sits down. That's looking at him, and he's looking at this coyote. And finally, he says, "Hello, coyote." The coyote said, "Hello back." And Castaneda was like, "Wow, I didn't know coyote could talk." Coyote was, "Did you ever try talking to one?" So that whole attitude. I mean, I know it's fiction or it's supposed to be nonfiction. All the teachings of Don Juan, but there's stuff in between the lines here. It make perfect sense. It's like, yeah, did you ever try talking to one? How do you
Hmm.
know that animals cannot be used? Humans, our species, we're so full of ourselves. We think we know everything. I
Hmm.
mean, we look down upon animals, because they're big, we're the intelligent species. But we learn a lot just from watching animals and just, being around them. And the native people knew that for a long time. I mean, they didn't treat animals as a lesser. They were the brothers and sisters of the forest. When they went
Hmm.
hunting, if you hunted a deer, you always had to do certain prayers and apologize for taking the deer's life and apologize to spirits because you're taking a life, but you're using it to save lives so your family will eat.
Right. Yeah.
It brings me on a story. When I had my pipe awakened, the ceremony, we were sitting in a circle. The medicine man was the first one that spoke, and he rubbed it with dirt. And we had a young Apache boy in the circle. He was 15, and so it was important that he be there too, so he would learn. And passing the pipe, and while we're passing the pipe, the medicine man goes, "Look at the ants. Pay attention to what they're doing." So I'm sitting there going, "All right." I look around, look at the ants. I noticed one crawled across my leg and went towards the center where we're sitting in a circle. And what the medicine man had done, he had dug a little hole in the ground and put a little pinch of tobacco in the ground as an offering to grandmother, the creator. And I'm watching these ants coming from different directions, crawling over us, and they're all going to the middle of the circle. And they're all going into the hole with the tobacco. And a few minutes later, that entire hole was filled with ants, and they're swarming. And I'm watching this, and I'm like, whoa, this is impossible. This can't be happening. And the circle of ants in this hole, this level, they start going down, and they disappear. And there's no more ants. And I'm like, what the hell just happened? And the old guy goes, did you see what happened? He goes, his ants just carried down the tobacco, carried the offering down into Mother Earth. He goes, remember this, even a tiny ant can work do the work for the Great Spirit. So even something as lowly as an ant can serve a purpose. He goes, ants, insects, animals, they can all do stuff for the Creator. We're all tied together, our spirits. So I saw that. I said, well, that's the most important lesson I'll have in a long time, is seeing that. And this was done for the benefit of everybody there to see that. So they made an amazing visual for watching during this pipe ceremony with the pipe being awakened.
That's really interesting. I read somewhere that ants, if they encounter a comrade that is drunk, that they will carry him home to have him sleep it off.
Drunk ants, yeah. I don't know if you drunk ants before.
But I think if it's an ant from another colony, they just leave it alone, like tough or whatever. It's time for the pet peeve segment. Everyone has those little things that annoy them, but we rarely mention them when we get to know someone. What are your pet peeves?
My pet peeves are the people who judge other people by the way they look. My biggest pet peeve, and you'll see it. I saw it in the military. People looking at this number of stripes on your sleeve and automatically assuming your level of intelligence based on the number of stripes. And you see it today. I mean, I don't dress fancy. I don't wear a three-piece suit and go around like I'm a rich lawyer type. I'm comfortable jeans and a t-shirt sort of guy. And that's my daily, just my way I look every day. And I got long hair and I got some tattoos and stuff. And people who meet me, I'll see this all the time. Oh, this is so-and-so, and you're looking at me, and they've already judged me. The moment they met me, they've already judged me. You see it in their eyes. You can see it, and you're talking and having a conversation with them. And then if they go, what do you do for a living? And if I say writer, you see the look change instantly. Like, oh, now I just became more respectable, where 30 seconds before, I was basically the stuff on the bottom of your shoe. And I hate that people judge people like that. People look down on goths because they're wearing black and, got green hair. Who cares? A lot of those people I've met who are the freakiest looking people are usually the smartest. They're rebelling because they want to march to their own drummer. They don't want to be conformed to a certain pattern they have to be. They're doing their own thing. Yeah. I love the artist types. I love the kooks and the hippies and the weirdos and the freaks. They're all very intelligent people. And I hate the people who look at you and they're judging you from day one. Now I get that. Oh, you're right. Then they say writer. Then it's like, oh, he must have money, or he must have this. Or, oh, do you know Stephen King? I get that a lot. You know Stephen King? No, I don't. Leave me alone. But especially like in places like in Central Florida, there's some rich communities like Winter Park.
Oh yeah.
And you see the people where they judge you, and they'll judge the way I look. They'll judge my wife, and all they put us down. Oh, we're the servants category. So they find out what you do, and then it's like, their eye, the way they look at you completely changes. I'm laughing on the inside. Like 30 seconds ago, you don't even want to talk to me. Yeah, that's a huge pet peeve with me. People judging other people. The whole judge a book by its cover thing.
Right, but people do judge books by their cover.
They do. I know. I've had some terrible covers.
Yeah. All right. I'm not agreeing that yes, you've had bad covers, but I mean that
true, I've had some amazing covers, and I had some really, really terrible ones.
What do you think makes a great cover?
Something just kind of tells a story. It's like a good painting. You don't want to tell too much, but you want to get them interested to pick it up.
Yeah.
I mean, with Crota, one of the covers I liked was the German edition because it had the eyes of the creature, just enough to show it was overlooking a cemetery. So as a horror fan, it's like, oh, I'm going to pick this up and just flip it over and see what the back of it is, see what it's about. Just enough to get you interested. I love those kind of things. I love covers that offer, kind of like almost a sense of a beginning of a quest, a sense of loneliness, where you're going to go on a journey. Just looking at the cover, you're about to embark on an adventure. I love those type covers.
I wonder if there's an outfit that does that. When we go back to judging a human by the way they look.
Yeah. Right? Quest outfit. Yeah.
Yes. We're looking at like that guy's getting ready to go out on a journey.
Something like from Lord of the Rings or a Larry Elmore painting where you got the whole thing, you get your chainmail on, you're ready to go, you get your hiking boots.
Like that guy's going places. What were you afraid of as a child? And what are you afraid of now?
I had to really think about this because I didn't think I was scared of anything. I'm not scared of monsters and being in the woods at night or things like that, for normal fears. But if I had to say something, the thing I'm kind of probably scared of is hospitals and doctors.
Mm.
Because it's never a good thing when you go to see a doctor. You don't
Mhm.
go because you're happy and healthy. You go because you got a problem. My earliest childhood memories are of hospitals in pain. I was born with some health problems when I was little. One of them was that the wall of my navel, where the umbilical cord is, didn't close. So I had to wear these huge bandages that covered my whole stomach until I was three years old.
Oh, wow.
Otherwise, my intestines would have come out.
Oh.
And it was like the changing these bandages was so painful for a little guy, and having to go and have surgery when you're like 3 years old, and being in a hospital, and your parents aren't there, you're dealing with people you don't know, and it's like, yeah. So that got some bad memories. When I was 12, I went to have my tonsils taken out because back then they snipped your tonsils. They always told you, oh, it's an easy thing, and you won't get sick no more, and you'll have ice cream. I almost bled to death.
Ooh.
I woke up and I was covered with blood and filling bowls of blood. Now, ever since then, I haven't trusted hospitals. I don't trust doctors. And my blood pressure goes up every time I go to see one. They're
Mm.
always like, your blood pressure's high. I said, that's because I'm here. Try to get in 20 minutes, I'll be fine. And they're like, why you got a high blood pressure? Because I don't like you people. I don't like hospitals because hospitals are places of death. They're worse than cemeteries because people actually die in hospitals. And yeah, I just get creeped out, especially at night at the hospitals. That I don't trust any Western doctor.
Well, I can imagine after those early experiences. I mean, why would
Yeah.
you?
I know they're
Yeah.
there for the good, but you're just kind of like, they want to cut on you, probe on you, or do some weird stuff to you every time you go in.
Rounding this out on a positive note, what are you looking forward to in the future?
I've got several projects in the work. I'm looking forward to them coming out. I got some of my books are out of print, coming back out again by different publishers. I've got new stories coming out. I got a story that I really enjoyed doing. It was a Wendigo story, and it ties in. It's based on the story of Swift Runner, who was a Cree Indian in Canada back in the 1800s, who ate his wife, 6 kids, and his in-laws, and blamed it on being possessed by a Wendigo spirit. So I did a story involving him. So I was finally broke down and did a Wendigo story.
Is there a win at the end of this?
No, not really.
I can't imagine.
No, it's a short story.
My stories end with a win.
It has mercy in it. It has a kind of compassion in it, but it doesn't necessarily have a happy ending. But
I see. Okay.
But that I was recently announced I'm going to be a guest of honor at StokerCon in Pittsburgh in June of next year.
That's exciting.
Looking forward to that because Pittsburgh is the stomping grounds of George Romero, who brought us Night of the Living Dead. So it's kind of special to me because George and I were friends. We came very close to doing a movie together based on my novel Evil Whispers. It didn't happen because the writer's strike killed the deal. We couldn't talk to anybody during that time.
Oh.
So it's kind of nice just going to a convention in his shadow. So looking forward to that. A lot of stuff coming out that, as long as I got stuff coming out, it's something to look forward to. That and death,
Hold on. Did you just say you're looking forward to death?
Sure, it's the next adventure. I mean,
it's a nice way to look at it.
Nobody gets off this planet alive no matter what we do. I mean, you could exercise all you want, drink plenty of water, take your vitamins, you're still going to die.
Would you go to Mars? Would you go to Mars if they said, all right, we're going to have a couple of flights? You want to be on the first one?
I was thinking that's what I'm going to do when I die. I'm going to go to Mars and see if Ray Bradbury's sitting up there having a nice conversation. I mean, I'm hoping, if we did good in this lifetime, I'm hoping it's one of the benefits of being dead. You get to travel the universe.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would love to be at Mars. And that whole loneliness. I grew up reading those stories about Mars in the old science fiction novels. So yeah, some place like that. Even if I was the only one there, I'd have a good time.
Well, you have such an active imagination.
Yeah, Martian cities. I mean, I know they're talking about a Mars trip, and people aren't going to be making it back. If you go there, you're stuck there. It's like at my age, it's like, okay, really, I don't want to live to be 85 and experience the phlegm years. I still have all my mental faculties. I don't want to, have Alzheimer's and dementia, because that's another scary thing.
Right.
You forget everything that's important to you and everything you stand for. I knew a
Hmm.
man who had dementia really bad. Had been a reporter for Chicago newspaper. I felt so sorry for him because this was a man who had to be brilliant at one time in his life and barely wait bye. I mean, that's just a cruel joke. So
Hmm.
hopefully I'll check out before that happens.
I'm with you on that. And now it's time for the very interesting game show. This isn't trivia. Throw accuracy out the window and give me your most ridiculous and creative answers instead. And let's see if you can come up with the most interesting answer. Are you ready? These questions come from the Halloween edition of the very interesting game. And the first question is, what do zombies do for fun when they're not busy hunting for food or eating?
They come to Florida. I
What
mean,
do they do in Florida?
Florida is the perfect place for zombies. Now you got to remember, you're a zombie. There's people trying to shoot you in the head, so you have to blend in. So you come to Florida because Florida has a ton of tourists, and a lot of them from Europe are very paisley faced or very no tans. So they go to the theme parks and stand in the lines and barely move because zombies can barely walk. They got to do that slow shuffle. That's
Uh-huh.
perfect for the long lines at Disney. So you can always
Oh.
spot the zombies because they're wearing the floral shirts. They got the shorts and the sandals with the black socks and the very pale legs. They look like English tourists. I mean, plus Florida is God's waiting room. We have a large senior citizen population, so they can blend in there. They can
Uh-huh.
hang out in senior citizen rec centers and stuff. They love to play shuffleboard because you don't have to move too fast.
I
And
see.
bingo is another zombie favorite. Although the zombies do tendency to call bingo every time a number's called, but then again, the people playing the games just think it's another patient with dementia. I mean, during COVID, the zombies couldn't really get out of the nursing homes where they were hiding out, and they
Uh-huh.
had to do hallway bingo, where they stood out in the hall, yelled bingo, but the zombies were hiding under the beds of the patients, yelling bingo at every number. So they blend in down here with the rest of them. You'll see them on the beaches and stuff. I mean, where else could they blend in but Florida, where you got 90% old people?
Good points all the way around. My little niece, she said that the zombies would go roller skating with tall pineapple hats, throwing coconuts at each other. That was her
Nice.
answer. Yeah. Yeah. She
Those are
wasn't
energetic zombies. That's the fast zombies. I was thinking of the Romero slow zombies, just shuffling along.
fast zombies are scary.
They are.
Yeah, they're pretty terrifying. So I guess that's what she was thinking about. All right. So, question number 2, describe the best Halloween costume you have ever seen. And yours counts if you'd like to count
Okay.
yourself.
Well, the best Halloween costumes I've ever seen are usually happen at conventions. I mean,
Mm.
the best one I personally have seen was at the World Science Fiction Convention in 1992. That goes way back. It was here in Orlando, and
In the late
somebody
1900s.
somebody recreated the Pumpkinhead costume. I don't know if you've seen the movie Pumpkinhead.
Yes.
They did the costume from that movie, and it was identical. It was very creepy. When they come on stage, it had the weird lighting and the music, and they did all the mechanical, so you had the long fingers to get move and stuff. It was absolutely terrifying. They did
Wow.
such a great job. At the other end of the spectrum, probably the most humorous is my mother's costume. She didn't know where to. She had a costume party at work, and she didn't know what to go as. And I was teasing her because she was into crafts and she had a bunch of artificial flowers. I said, "Well, just sew a bunch of flowers on your dress and go as a blooming idiot." And she won first place in the costume contest.
Oh, good for her. Oh, that's great. I know we already covered this, but I have an official question in the Halloween edition. Have you ever encountered a ghost or experienced another paranormal event? And if so, describe what happened.
I have experienced quite a few of them. I mean, at working in a cemetery, there were several incidents, but my house is haunted. I mean, spirits are amongst us, and I just happen to have quite a few hanging out with me.
Do you
It's
think they're following you around because of your occupation?
I think they just want to bug me. I mean, they have humors. My sons, when they have friends come over, they used to have to tell them, "Hey, if you see something, don't freak out." And their friends would come over, then they wouldn't come back. I mean, they would see something. When my house was destroyed by Hurricane Gene, I had a gentleman doing the tile, and he wanted to do the tile work at night. He wanted to work overnight. He was a redneck, wasn't scared of anything. I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "But I want to let you know this house is haunted, and the spirits are going to mess with you if you're in here at night." Oh, I don't believe in ghosts. Okay, you don't now, but you will. I said, but feel free to come in here and work. So he was working it overnight, and something crashed. He went to investigate it. Something else happened. But about 3 in the morning, enough stuff happened in here. It chased him out. He came back the day later in the daytime with the biggest dog I've ever seen, but only work in the daytime. And when he left, he goes, I am never, ever coming back to your house again. It scared him so bad. Him and the people he worked with all had experiences here, and none of them will come to my house to this day. And they'll tell you, that guy's crazy. His house is haunted. But yeah, that was kind of, we get used to it. I've seen people here. I've seen full figure apparitions. Stuff's moved. Spirits like anybody else. They just want to be acknowledged. Their presence want to be acknowledged. They don't want to be ignored. So, I'd say, okay, how you guys doing? Quit messing with me. And, they play jokes, but we're used to it. But yeah, it's kind of like, it's not a daily thing, but, at least, a couple of weeks we'll have an incident happen. We'll laugh about it. Probably doesn't help that I got a used casket sitting in the parlor, but that probably adds to it.
I'm sure it does. So how does your wife take all of this?
She laughs about it. Or she'll tell me, she'll be like, I just saw somebody walk across the kitchen. Or like, you just come in here? I'm like, no, I haven't been there. So I just saw a man walk across the kitchen. I said, all right, somebody's visiting. Well, like, okay, or we'll hear the front door open and close, and as clear as a bell, you heard it. I'm like, all right, somebody's here. They just walked in, but they'll let us know about, what somebody's here, so what's going on. I'm like, all right. As long as they don't bother us to do anything bad, it's, if you see stuff out of the corner of your eye, or you see things walking across your room, it's not upsetting. It's startling sometimes, but never upsetting.
All right. For the next question, the ceilings on front porches are painted haint blue to prevent evil spirits from entering the home. What color would you paint your front door, and what would you want it to keep out?
I would paint my door mundane yellow.
Okay.
I want to keep out the normal people because they scare me.
All right. I love that.
Only crazy is allowed. I mean, only artists and, people who watch, horror movies, read comic books, and there are big kids that never grew up. Yeah, that's who I want in my house. I don't want people who follow the Kardashians or invest in real estate or only worried about their job and make money. I want the fun people. So mundane yellow would keep them out.
I love that. Years ago, I worked in a corporation that always wanted a vibrant workforce, but they would paint all of the walls beige. I mean, just everything was beige everywhere I looked. And I thought red paint and purple paint cost the same as beige paint. And you're paying a person to come around and paint the whole office again beige. Like, why would you do that? Color is so important. And I don't think people give it enough thought.
My walls are covered with all kinds of weird stuff. It's like a museum. I've actually had people bring their relatives into my house and they take pictures. It was funny when my granddaughter lived here, her friends would come over, and the mothers always accompanied the friends. And they would tiptoe into my house looking around, scared, startled. The next time they came back, they always had a camera. So,
Okay, here's the next question. On Michael Jackson's song Thriller, Vincent Price was paid less than $1,000 for his part, which was recorded in only 2 takes. Whose voice would completely change that feel of the song? And demonstrations are encouraged.
I can't demonstrate the voice, but the guy would have to be Gilbert Gottfried. I mean, I wanted Gilbert Gottfried to read my eulogy when I died, but he passed away before I did.
Yeah.
I think it would change the entire record.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, that'd be funny.
Just that raspy, grumpy voice. I mean, you got to have Gottfried or Don Rickles or at the very least William Shatner. I mean,
William Shatner.
I love his performance of Rocket Man. I can just see him doing Thriller.
What about like Fran Drescher?
Yeah. Oh, that would be awesome with that nasally sound. That would be so cool.
Right. Okay. All right. And for the last question of the day, which is asked on every episode, what should have been invented by now?
Replaceable body parts. Snap and plug body parts. You got a bad elbow, snap it in. 5 minutes later, you're good to go. You got a bad back, snap and play. Just plug it in like you do a plastic car part.
I love that. That's a great idea.
Everything should be replaceable.
I don't think we're that far away. I'm going to 3D print that, put some stem cells all over it or whatever.
Take my brain out and put it in a robot. I mean, I don't care. I mean, like, that'd be perfect. I mean, everybody's got these aches and pains, and you fall apart when you get to a certain age. Like, knee problems, no problem. You'll be done in 3 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, thanks, Al. How can folks get in touch with you?
I have a website under my name. I am on Facebook lurking somewhere, and I have a Twitter page. Now it's going back on Twitter because when I got there, some lady was using my name as her Twitter page. I don't
What?
think she's there anymore, and I didn't know whether to be offended or take it as a compliment. I couldn't even use my own name on Twitter.
And where can they buy your books?
Uh, they can buy them. I know Amazon.com has them. I know Barnes and Noble website has them. Probably bookstores, used bookstores, eBay. Probably find them in trash fills, landfills, and
Aw.
libraries have them. They don't want
All
to spend the
right.
money.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then any last words of advice for people that want to branch out and become a full-time author?
Well, it takes courage to be a writer. I mean, it really does. It's scary when you first start out. People are scared of rejections and they're scared of being criticized, but that always happens. Just take it with a grain of salt. Somebody says they don't like your stuff, that's one person's opinion. Reviewer says they don't like your stuff, that's one person's opinion. It means nothing more than that. And don't be afraid. If I started out and I always said yes. I would have people come to me and say, "Can you write a story for this anthology?" I would say yes, and then go home and sweat bullets, going, "No, what have I got myself into? I can't do it." Then you sit down and get serious. I mean, you can do it. You just got to keep your butt in the chair, but never turn down an offer to work.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I love getting to know you.
Well, thank
And
you for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
oh, yeah, thank you so much. All right, folks, until next time, be interesting.
Pretty much, I'm a prostitute of the literary world. Anything that pays.
If someone were to just say your name, what would they most likely associate you with? Would it be
Horror.
horror?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
And so
I
is
love
horror.
writing it because it's one thing to have somebody say they liked your story, but to have somebody say that your story scared them and they slept with the lights on is very cool.